Welcome back to the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Benko, and today we have an extraordinary guest joining us, Nick Lavery. Nick is an active duty member of the United States Army Special Forces, a Green Beret, and a true embodiment of resilience and determination. In 2013, while serving in Afghanistan, Nick's life changed forever when he lost his leg in combat. But instead of taking a medical retirement, Nick refused to back down. Through grit, perseverance, and a relentless mindset, he defied the odds and worked his way back to active duty, rejoining his unit as a combat operator, becoming one of the first above-the-knee amputees to return to combat operations. Nick is also the founder and CEO of Precision Components, LLC, where his Team Machine trains, advises, and inspires organizations and individuals to unlock their full potential. His extensive military career and unique expertise in special operations have earned him numerous awards, including the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Bronze Star with Valor, among many others. But beyond his accolades, Nick is a proud husband and a father of 2 young boys, and the author of the best-selling book, Objective Secure, a battle-tested guide to goal achievement. In today's episode, Nick shares his journey of resilience, personal growth, and emotional awareness. He talks about the importance of humility, teamwork, and the role of community in achieving success. You will hear how small, incremental changes can make a big difference in personal development and why taking ownership of your journey is so critical. We've got a lot to cover. So Lima Foxtrot Golf, aka LFG. Nick, thank you so much for being here on the Acknowledge to Action podcast. It's a privilege and an honor to have you here today.
Yeah, Matt, I appreciate the time, man. Looking forward to it.
Oh, this is great. I've been really looking forward to this talk for a couple weeks now. I was first introduced to you a couple weeks before your book, Objective Secure, came out through JT Frank and Consequence of Habit. Yeah. And from there, I've been an incredible source of motivation and inspiration on not just for me, but I could speak for so many others as well. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
It's really cool to have here. So before we jump into like the meaningful impact for others in our conversation, I like to do like a 1-minute advisory version of an introduction. So for those of you listening who don't know Nick Lavery, you will, because his book is amazing, Objective Secure. And there's so many good draw points from that. And his background is amazing as far as the perseverance and the resiliency he demonstrated. But I just wanted to start off that these are some things that I've drawn on just from your book and from following you on you've been on a number of podcasts and all that. So 1-minute advisor, here goes. You had a very transient childhood growing up, moving a lot, always in progress. You were graduating high school at age 17. You were a college football recruit. You went from strong safety to linebacker. You joined the Army shortly after graduating college as an 18 X-ray Special Forces contract. Getting through selection with a level of determination and focus few could match, understand, or even appreciate. You became operational as a weapons tactical team member, and then you chose to learn Russian while in training with the intent to deploy to Afghanistan and eventually learning, I think it was Farsi. Eventually took on Farsi. Your injuries that you sustained was a broken tailbone while in training, and then when you were operational shrapnel to the left shoulder. You had an AK-47 round to the face, cheek area, and a right leg injury that eventually resulted in the amputation. Then you went on to becoming the first above-the-knee amputee to return to full Special Forces mission status, and then the Warrant Officer School, and then in combat diver qual course. All right, here's the 5 seconds to get the green light to go to the conversation. Then you went on to writing Objective Secure, establishing Team Machine, Precision Components, and The Forge, just to name a few. So that's the 1-minute advisor introduction.
Nicely done, man. I may just pack up and leave. You can handle this all on your own, brother. That was great.
Well, thank you. It's as a C-130 load master, I know how important it is to come prepared, especially when we're working with our brothers and sisters in arms. So
roger that.
Mentioned. I just wanted to highlight how I got connected with you through JT Frank and reading your book, Objective Secure. And it came at a time, bro, I think the book was released in 2002. It was right around 2021, 2022 is when the book came out.
Yeah, 22, January.
And I was just, I'd say the podcast I did before this was the Veteran Power Hour at a community college. And I was in progress with just kind of learning that, and but getting introduced to you gave me motivation to focus on. Your book was a big source of inspiration. And then when I had a break in service from my podcast, I reflected on some of the your writing to get back into to the swing of it. And then here we are with the knowledge to action. So
Outstanding.
I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you for sharing that, brother. I appreciate you.
I had a couple questions dialed up for you, and I just like to turn it over to you because I know, again, your story's out there. It's amazing, and I've heard it a few times, and every time I hear it, it gets a little bit better. But I know our focus today is we're going to be talking about resiliency, motivation, and everything that you're doing with Team Machine, and everything that you're doing as far as being a motivational speaker, and how you've turned these experiences you've had into incredibly meaningful results.
Right on. No, I appreciate that, man. It's been a wild ride so far, which is probably putting it somewhat lightly. And it's kind of funny you mentioned that because I have the privilege to spend a lot of time with a lot of different organizations and people. And, a lot of times people want me to come in and we get the request like, can Nick come and share his story or tell his story, which I totally get. And, it's humbling that anyone would be interested in that. But I always kind of smirk and kind of lean my head a little bit when I hear that. Cause I'm still writing my story, man. Like I'm just getting warmed up, and certainly I've been through some unique experiences over the past, few years at least, but there's a lot left to be written, man. We're just getting going.
Oh, nice. I seriously, I know you just said that, but as I was reviewing, preparing for this, I was like, man, I feel like Nick is just getting warmed up as far as like,
Oh yeah.
just like in progress. And my background as a C-130 Loadmaster, there's a term we always say, like, in progress. If we have a checklist that's open, it's in progress. And the takeaway from that for me is a lot of things in our life is in progress. We could have a checklist open, a respective checklist, a life checklist open, and it's in progress. And we would close it out, and then we open up a new one, to do what needs to be done. I was maybe because I'm getting in the Halloween spirit of things, but if we could take your version of motivation, discipline, and everything you've done and put it into an elixir or a potion, I mean, productivity would be off the charts for people, and solution focused actions and all that. But in all seriousness, what is your rest? What has helped you? I like to think of motivation, discipline as a dial, not an on-off switch. And hearing your story, you got dialed in at a fairly young age, like in high school at some point. But at what point did you acknowledge, like, hey, I'm dialed in, and this is what I'm going to go do in life, and just go, crush it and conquer it like you have been?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. It's been fluid for most of my life. I'm at a place now where I definitely have a more laser focus in general and on like specific missions. But I was a knucklehead growing up. I was a knucklehead kid in high school. Made a lot of poor choices. And, I was fortunate to be decent enough in athletics, particularly in football, for that to get me into college, because I was a horrible academic and I did the bare minimum. And even at college, I was really on a not so great path and making some really poor choices there as well. 9/11 was a catalyst moment for me, as it was with a lot of people that decided to serve in the military from that generation. And that was really the first that gave me like a real sense of focus on something. But the military wasn't intended to be this career path for me, and certainly not a lifestyle I was going to assume. I was really angry following 9/11, and I wanted to be part of the payback. That was really it, and so I came in with this idea of this being this short-term stint in my life. I'd serve, a 5-year contract. I'd get to the tip of the spear. I'd kick some ass, get some payback, and then I'd get out of the military and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. That really was as far as I was seeing things. And then, I got into the lifestyle and everything changed for me because I fell in love with doing it. Most significantly, it was with the people that I get to do it alongside of. So everything changed for me at that point. And it became a career, it became a lifestyle. And, from there, things just kind of began to elevate. But I was super focused on just living the life of a team guy. That's really all I wanted to do. It consumed almost my entire life. Whatever I was doing, it was about being better as an asset on the ODA. And that's all I really cared about. That's all I really wanted to do. Did that for a while. And then, when I got injured, more specifically, the one that resulted in the loss of my leg, then things, that was obviously a pretty big turning point for me where I had to really dig in and find a capability that was already existing within me that I didn't quite know was there, to begin tapping into and shifting into those gears that I didn't know was even an option at the time. But, when I was coupled with a pretty traumatic event in conjunction with setting my sights on something that basically everybody decided was impossible, like those two things coming together is what I required to be able to reach those next levels of discipline and productivity and work ethic and consistency and all these things. But what I like to highlight is those options were there within me the entire time. They were there. It took me having resulted of this injury for me to recognize that they were there, but the capability was there the entire time.
That's interesting. You explain it in detail that way, because like all of us, like most, if not all human beings, there's a lot of our potentials like untapped. And we could read from a textbook and say, I would like to do this, but a lot of times it takes experiences to kind of pull back those layers and kind of, going back to the whole recipe concept, like you need this variable and this, like multiple variables to come together for things to come to fruition. And here, noted it was a traumatic experience. I mean, it was what you went through and having your leg amputated, and then making that decision. So that was a variable in that, but then you dug even deeper within yourself. And then there were some other external resources. Well, what other external resources or variables would you say? Because you got the antecedent of the injury, and then you had a good awareness piece of who you are and who you were, and like, all right, this is what I need to do. What were some other components and variables that you drew from to get that momentum and to take you to that next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tell you, it was a journey, and it wasn't this way the entire time. And admittedly, I kind of felt pretty horrible about myself because of this. And I'll explain. Like the first year or so, maybe even more than that, year and a half ish, when I was working to get back to the teams, it was mostly fueled by me needing to get back to a lifestyle that I love, proving the naysayers wrong, proving myself right, making the enemy regret not killing me when they had the chance. That kind of like surface level deep drive in, competitiveness and stubbornness, to be frank. That's what I relied on. And it really wasn't until I started making some pretty substantial progress of getting back to operational status that, relying on my teammates. And there's kind of some irony there, because these guys were around me like every single day. I mean, granted, I was working as an instructor and those guys were still on the team, but we were in the same small area, like physically, a lot of the days. So these guys were physically around me regularly. But it took me a while to recognize that I was trying to go back to a team, and I really hadn't thought about them up until that point. And that's why I felt horrible about myself. And literally, I woke up in the middle of the night at like 3 a.m. thinking I was going to die. Like I was having a panic attack because it like hit me in my sleep that I was going back to like 11 other dudes, all with families. And there's more to it than just me. So I relied on them as I brought this to them, and I was like, hey guys, listen, like this is what I'm trying to do. And you know that, but like, have you guys even thought this through? Do you even want me back on this team? And, the answer was like, hey, listen, dude, we don't know if it's going to work, but we want to be the ones to decide if it does. So stay on target, stay on course, keep going forward. And if you're somehow able to make it back here, we'll absolutely be the ones to give you that candid, no bullshit, objective truth, because there's just no place in that world for a liability. It just doesn't happen. So
Mm.
I knew that as I know it now. So what that allowed me to do was place a lot of my trust in them to have that logical, objective perspective, because it was so emotional for me,
Yeah.
that I was so obsessed with it that it was essentially impossible for me to apply a high degree of logic, because my emotional state was so high, because those two things are antagonistic of each other. When emotion goes up, logic goes down, and vice versa. So it was very personal to me. It was emotional for me, but I was able to rely on them, that I could stay as obsessed and laser focused as I was, because I knew those guys wouldn't allow me to put them or the team or the mission into a position where I was a liability to them. So
Mm.
relying on those guys became a huge factor for me to not only continue to press forward, but it leveled me up quite a bit, because prior to that, when I was going into the gym for my third training session of the day, when I'm just absolutely beat to shit and I'm exhausted, and all of the excuses are sounding the most convincing in that state of weakness, rather than me thinking about getting off of the C-130 back in Afghanistan with my arms in the air, I was thinking about my teammate's 5-year-old son.
Mm.
And I have to go do this work now, not for you, but for them, for that kid. And that just took me to a whole nother level.
Wow, that I really appreciate how you acknowledged the emotion piece, because one of the podcasts you were on, you open up and you mention, and I hope I get this quote. I mean, I was jotting things down pretty quick, but you said a warrior acknowledges emotion. It's not possible to be emotionless, and it's coming from the tip of the spear warrior like yourself. That says a lot, because I think sometimes as guys, men, dudes, whatever you want to call it, it's like, oh, emotion. Like, it's cool to be angry. It's cool to be tough. It's cool. But to tap into those less desirable emotions, shall I say, as far as like the full spectrum. Because like you said, when emotions are high, our cognitions are low. So whether it's anger or, being upset, or you can go down the spectrum of emotions. But I like how you said, like, a warrior acknowledges the emotion. It sounds like that experience and that moment you had where you woke up in the middle of the night, like you said, and you had this like epiphany, and you just had this realization. It was an emotional recognition and an acknowledgement. And like you said, it's not possible to be emotionless. And I think when we acknowledge that and kind of harness it, we're so much better off, and we could channel it in ways that are amazing, and to where we could focus on the goal, execute the mission personally, professionally, and all that stuff.
Yeah, man. I mean, and to be clear, there are neurological conditions within a very tiny percent of human beings, based off of a deficiency, that actually are emotionless. And so that is,
Oh
it's
yeah,
possible
yeah.
under incredibly unusual circumstances where a human being has like a problem where they lack emotion. So 99.999% of human beings are creatures of emotion. And like Dale Carnegie in one of his books says it brilliantly. He says, when you're dealing with a human being, you're not dealing with a creature of logic, you're dealing with a creature of emotion. And it is the exact same thing that makes us the most dominant species on this planet. And it is also the exact same thing that opens us up for a massive vulnerability, is because we are emotional creatures. There's this massive misconception, whether you're talking about service members in general, certainly when it comes to special operations personnel, that we're emotionless. And I can understand like the reason, Hollywood kind of
Mm.
portrays that at times, where we're just these like cyborgs that are just going to like get a mission and go execute, and there's no emotion whatsoever. And that's completely and totally inaccurate. What makes special ops operators different, I would say, is not the lack of emotion, but it's the ability to control the emotion. And this is a common
Mm.
thread amongst all high performers, regardless of whatever it is you do for a living. It's emotional regulation. That is the differentiator between high performers and then everybody else, because it goes against science. It goes against Mother Nature. It goes against our
Mm.
biology. To be able to take those emotions and at times be able to compartment them, to be able to apply a logical decision. It's not that you're trying to get rid of them. It's that you have them under your control, so you can wield them on purpose when it suits you. Because we're also talking about positive emotions.
Yeah.
Extreme emotions and logic are antagonistic regardless of the emotion. This includes
Yeah.
positive ones. So if you are incredibly joyful, like really happy, logic is also almost entirely out the window because you're at an emotional extreme. We have the ability, and it's a skill that requires training and deliberate effort to be able to do it on demand, is to deploy that on purpose. So like positive emotions like love or empathy or compassion, caring fiercely for a teammate, we can deploy that on purpose because it's in our interest to do so. It's when the emotions take over the decision entirely. That's
Yeah.
when things become problematic.
I saw you talk last year at the first Consequence of Habit, where you were the keynote speaker. While you were talking, I was texting myself of some great things, because you talked about the Soldier's Creed and how you transform that into everyday meaningful ways of life. There's one I wrote here, and it ties into what you just said. There is a razor thin line between controlled obsession and reckless madness. When we live on that line, we are maximizing our abilities.
Mm.
And that stuck with me. And I'm like, you're right, because it's like you can't overdo it, you can't underdo it, and it takes constant calibration for that, I imagine. And how you said a skill, a skill is, there's generic definitions of that, but a skill set is something we have to work at on a daily basis. We got to train and all this other stuff. Like, we could have talent, and that makes kind of entering the skill set a little more desirable or easy to get the momentum. But I think with whatever we call emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, there's so many applications to that. And especially in your world as a special operator, I imagine, like, you're always on that, or I should say more often than not, you need to be on that razor thin line, especially in the world of operations and executing missions, to be that dialed in. Because going back to what I said, it's not like an on and off switch. Okay, on, I'm dialed in. You got to work your way up, I imagine. You got to build yourself up, just like with most things, emotions, and when we're getting in the zone.
Man, it's definitely a skill. It's one that me and my team now teach. It's part of our curriculums, with clients all over the country. But that's true. And the quote that I use is the line between determination and madness. And you just explained it better than I could. It's like there's a tiny razor thin margin between obsession and reckless. And it moves. And that's the challenge of it, because as our capability continues to grow and additional variables are put into our lives, that margin is going to move around a bit. So it can be frustrating to be like, I thought I was living at the edge of my capability, like the absolute maximum, but then I just got better at this thing and this thing and this thing. And now I got to deal with this. So it's a moving goalpost, which is tough. But I think when we recognize that as just being the way it is, and then we're continuously hunting to find that gap or that line and stay on it as often as possible, knowing we're going to be continuously weaving in and out, either not putting out enough or operating recklessly in the absence of strategy, and things start to get chaotic where you're causing more damage than you are reaping an ROI. And you could look at this as even like a single training session, right? Like there is a point in a single training session in a weight room, let's just say, where you meet a point of diminishing returns, where no matter what else you do, any other strain or stress you put onto your body is no longer adding to the benefit you are going to gain from that training session. You're only causing more damage than you are gaining in return. There's a limit. And we can look at this physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. We do have limitations as human beings. And that's hard for a lot of people to accept, especially like go-get-it type A savages. And I'm one of them, humbly speaking. That realization can be hard to digest. But I think the second you can, now we're introducing some strategy and some objective logic and tactics with how I'm going to train and continue to push myself along all these different lines that make up our entire life, so we can stay close to that margin, knowing we're going to go over. And when we do, boom, that's when we rely on our teammates, our community, our programming, our mentors, like people that know better than us. We trust that, we adjust the system, and we just like continue on that cycle around and around and around.
Yeah, it's real easy to talk about a physical situation, working out, exercising. It's an easy thing for people to it's easier for people to grasp that concept, like the law of diminishing return. Like if I hit the gym at some point, or I've meets for that day or that particular cycle of doing a workout, I've met my max, I got to scale back. But as you said, how that applies to socially, emotionally, and all that stuff too. And it's a little bit harder because of the emotion. There isn't like a sign, like with a workout plan, with the physical regimen, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, all right, do this, do X, Y, and Z, and it more likely than not will result in these gains. When it comes to emotion and cognitions, and it's a whole, you're constantly calibrating and you're constantly adjusting in the moment. And even on the most simplest days, few things very rarely go according exactly to plan. How you wake up, we're constantly deviating, we're constantly
Yep.
adjusting, and all that stuff. And I think if we apply the microcosm of our everyday life to the big macrocosm, or vice versa, it'll help us attain a certain mindset, but also more importantly, or I shouldn't say more importantly, but just as important, attaining it and then maintaining it, to in all aspects of our life.
Yeah, and I would say to do that, or even get in the arena or ballpark of being able to do that, requires humility. And this is a character trait that is built within every curriculum I teach, most engagements that I do, regardless of who I get a chance to spend time with. It's a non-negotiable requirement, and this is one of the reasons as to why. Because we're gonna continue to get it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and if we don't have the humility, if our ego is just too strong for us to accept the fact that we still have a lot to learn in a lot of different areas, in fact,
Yeah.
all of the areas, then the game's already over before it's really started.
Mm-hmm.
Because failure is inevitable, right? Adversity is a requirement, and we're going to go overboard at times, period. I'm going to
Yeah.
spend too much time at work and not enough time with my family. I'm going to spend too much time with my kids, and I'm not working hard enough. Like it's a nonstop cycle of change and evolution. It's an organism. Like you and I are different now than we were when we started this conversation 15 minutes ago. So change is inevitable. Progress is optional, and I think without humility, it's likely not going to happen. And the kind of the irony of it is people will point that out to me at times, whether it's in the comments on social media or at an engagement. It's like, dude, you've been through all this stuff, but you just seem so humble, and that's of course a compliment to me. But kind of the funny part of that is like the answer to that is true. And yes, it's because I think it's just part of being a good person, but also it's an operationalized weapon. Like humility is a tool that's to be used. Humility, aggressiveness, discipline, like humility is a choice, just like all these other things that you can choose to do. So while it makes me proud that people recognize that, it's not altruistic, right? It's not like I am humble solely because I want you to think I'm a good person. Now, that's a good thing. I'm humble more significantly because it helps me be a better version of me. And
Yeah.
that may sound selfish, which is kind of the irony of humility sounding selfish, but it's absolutely true. Humility is an offensive weapon. And once you decide to leverage it and wield it, then yeah, like you come across as a good person and people want to be around you, and that's a great benefit to it. But humility is something that we can choose to use to make us better, regardless of what it is we're trying to do.
I like that. It's a tool we could put in our life hack toolbox. Humility is, I never heard it explained like that. Like humility, there's like this general sense, like just, taking it easy or just not being as dominant, or, I mean, there's so many different ways to define that, but to use it as a tool to make yourself a better person. I didn't hear it like that. I didn't process like that. I saw it as because when you're a better version of yourself, you're a better version of everyone around you. There's one thing, there's a note I wanted to mention on your teammachine.com and on your bio. There's one thing that really, really jumped out. I'll just read the sentence. Nick is a warrior, leader, teammate, and most importantly, a proud husband and a father of two young boys. I too am a proud husband, and I'm also a father of 2 young boys. So that all the more jumped out to me. And what you said is using humility to be a better version of yourself. Because when I'm a better version of myself, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a
Boom.
better teammate. And that is awesome. That's, some people, I don't know, that's just kind of where I'm at. And that's why this conversation is so awesome and meaningful, because we need those reflective times to identify that.
Yeah.
Right.
And
If
you know what,
you
dude? Let's break down humility real quick. And this is
okay.
like, I mean, I'll do some courses I'll teach like an hour block just on humility, but we'll do the quick like 2-minute version. Because
Okay.
you're right. It's like a very, I don't know, vague term. So like if I'm being humble, does that mean I'm just not an asshole? Is that what
Yeah.
that means? And like
Yeah.
maybe to some, which is probably a good thing in itself, but there are some absolute ingredients within that, more detailed. I'll give you 5 quickly.
Okay.
First is honesty. So people that are humble are honest. And while again, it's great to be honest externally, like tell your wife the truth, tell your son the truth. That's a good thing. I'm talking more significantly about telling yourself the truth.
Mm,
Like, do not lie to yourself. Tell yourself the truth, which is sometimes really difficult to do. So honesty is a staple within that. Self-awareness is another staple within humility. Authentically knowing your gaps, your shortcomings, your strengths, your deficiencies, a candid, objective, 30,000 foot view of your operational environment and your status within that environment. So self awareness. Gratitude, another aspect, another ingredient of people who live with humility. And again, being grateful, being appreciative for things is great. And like I'll use the example, like a basketball player hits the game winning shot and the crowd goes bananas and the microphones are in his face on the court. Hey, you just won the big game. How do you feel? I want to thank God. I want to thank my coach. I want to thank my kids. I want to thank my next door neighbor's dog. Like you're very appreciative when you're winning. And that's a good thing. I would say that's a
mm,
sustain. But what makes gratitude powerful is when you can deploy it when things are going wrong, when the
mm.
wheels have fallen off and you're one mistake, one failure after another. Can you be appreciative for one, the things you do have, and two, the lesson you're going to learn from getting it wrong? So gratitude is built within humility. People that are humble, they listen. Okay. People that are humble are coachable. And again, it's great socially because people would be more interested in being around you if they're telling you something and you're actually paying attention to them. But humble people are coachable.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson will tell you that the 2 most coachable players he's ever coached in his career are Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Arguably, the
Mm,
2 best basketball players to have ever lived are the most coachable. Now, some hear that and they're like, that makes no sense. Like, MJ just needs to go be MJ. He doesn't need to listen to anybody. He's the greatest to ever live. When the ironic truth is, part of what made him as great as he was because he was constantly listening. And it's because these types of people are never satisfied with where they're at. They
mm.
continuously need to get better. And if you're trying to get better, you need to be learning from people that know more than you about something, right? So
Yeah.
humble people listen. And lastly, humble people treat each other with respect. Kind of the golden rule, like treat others the way you want to be treated. And the reason why that is essential within humility is because you need a team. No one is going to win with consistency alone. Like the old
Yeah.
cliche expression, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are pack animals. Human beings are built to be pack animals as rooted in our need to survive. So treating each other with respect, i.e. a part of humility, is going to allow you to assemble that team around you to start filling in some of those gaps that you have, i.e. self-awareness. And now you're really cruising along.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot too. That lot of good
It's a lot there in
to
2 minutes, but there you go.
no, it was so the other components, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. But the whole knowledge to action recipe, right? There's so many acronyms out there. There's so many different mnemonics, like the OODA loop: absorb, orient, decide, act, right? There was an Air Force fighter pilot did that. And that's good stuff. For me, acknowledge to action is acknowledge, accept, process, plan, action, right? This is my life experiences. I kind of like wrap that into my own little version of what I need to do on a daily basis is acknowledge what's going on and then proceed to the action part. And also too, operationally, and, you know, being a career enlisted aviator, acknowledge is arguably one of the most important words we ever say in the aircraft, you know, when we're running checklists, like, you know, hey, you know, crew combat entry checklist, acknowledge loadmaster, and boom, you just go through, you proceed and do what you got to do to take action to complete that checklist. And then another one opens up, etc. So I like to share a quick, real brief story on where that just kind of like made sense to me. So whether I was counseling somebody or mentoring, this particular young airman did something and said some things that were probably more on the emotional, and he got in trouble. So I said, look, man, you need to run. I'm not going to lecture you, but you take this for what it's worth. You need to run your life like you do one hell of a job running that checklist in the aircraft. You need to run that checklist outside of the aircraft. You need to acknowledge what's going on, be aware of your surroundings and your environment so you could take the best possible action there is. So when somebody says something that kind of prompts you or rubs you the wrong way, at the end of the day, you're responsible for what you say and how you're responsible for your behaviors. And this particular individual, he's still in, he's kick-ass now. Like, I'm not saying that was what he needed to hear, but I share that of the power of acknowledge and being in the moment and how we could apply that. And your recipe to humility and those 5 components are absolutely something that we could reflect on a daily basis in a lot of different moments.
Yeah, it's not going away, you know,
Yeah.
and with that, like when you couple humility with ownership and like the concept, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit, you know, like one of the foundational aspects of ownership, which actually comes from Stoicism, is you control you. And by
Mm-hmm.
taking ownership of a situation or a set of circumstances, you are gaining power because you control you. And that's it. Now, you can influence others for sure,
Yeah.
maybe, but you definitely control you. That's it. And more specifically, what do you control? You control your actions, you control your attitude, and you control your effort. That's
Mm,
it. So like in
yeah.
those moments of turmoil or when you're getting it wrong, when you can stack that concept on top of humility, man, like you're really cruising in a solid direction.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much touch points on a daily basis, whether on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I mean, you name it. There's so much motivation out there. And I think I saw it on LinkedIn. And this person either shared a picture or wrote, but the point I'm sharing is we may not necessarily be responsible for our circumstances, but we are responsible for how we proceed and heal and get better and take action. And I think that speaks perfectly to what you just said. There's external circumstances and variables that we didn't start or force or initiate, but we were on the receiving end of it. Now we're responsible for how we proceed forward. So whether it's to speak to your experience that they get injured, it's like, okay, now this is on me. This is what happened, but now it's on me to do what I want to do, what needs to be done. You know, you couple it with that need and want, and you constantly evaluate that. And like you said, it's a journey. It's an ongoing process as far as like it adapts, it changes literally by the moment sometimes, you know?
Yeah, and the thing is like playing the victim is forever an option. Like you can always revert to that and blame and not my fault and the circumstances, bad genetics, bad timing, shit luck. I mean, like that will
Mhm.
just you can play that game as long as you want. It'll keep going around and around and around and around and around. But the truth is, you're not going anywhere until you
Yeah.
get off that merry-go-round. And you know the thing happened, whatever it is, your fault or not is, to your point, Matt. It's irrelevant at that point. Fault
Yeah.
or it doesn't matter. Like
Mhm.
you can dwell on that all day long, but it's not going to make a difference. The thing happened. So regardless of whose fault it was, and chances are you were a part of that,
Yeah.
it's your responsibility, period. So it's your responsibility to take that trauma. And I'm not insensitive to bad times. I've been through many myself. I've experienced it, but you are responsible for dealing with that trauma or that bad day or that horrible experience or horrible set of circumstances. It's your responsibility to take that in and figure out how to live the best possible life you can. That's it.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. That's so awesome. Oh, is that even a word? Awesomely put. That's just, but just taking, yeah, absolutely. That just something we have to take ownership, action, acknowledge it, accept it, and then move forward. And when we draw from sources like yourself, and it's our, whether it's stoicism to using objective secure to get some data points, input, quality output. So we get those inputs to help us take action and take ownership of that's what really helps. And that's something we constantly have to monitor and adjust and replenish with
Yeah.
that. So
Choices, man. That's it.
yeah, exactly.
Choices.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when you were talking, I always come up with the title based off the conversations. It's not like a premeditated episode title, but you said something, change is inevitable, progress is optional. I think that's a pretty kick-ass title name for our episode. 'Cause to this point, I think it's summarizing kind of some of the things we've been talking about. There's one I wanted to go back to your website, and it's a personal thing for me. I've been in the Air National Guard for the last 16 plus years, and prior to that, I was active duty for about 4.5. So pushing a little lower down, really 21 some years. I could not have done what I've done without my family. And going back to that sense, most importantly, a proud husband and father of 2 young boys. So a shout out to your wife and your kids and your family. It's sometimes, I shouldn't say we gloss it over, but it's such an important component of a sustainable career, whether it's in the military, first responder, I mean, anything. It's not limited, but having that is just amazing. And the places you've been and just the level of commitment you need to do as an operator in special forces, I could only imagine how challenging that is. But here you are. Most importantly, I just have to just foot stomp that. How awesome that is to see that on your team machine website under your bio.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, to say that those 3 humans are the best part of my life would be a dramatic understatement.
Yeah.
And, massive catalyst for me and shifting, and a huge part of where I am today and how I operate day to day. And I get like a glimpse of that. And, me and my family, my wife, we have a unique dynamic. Like, she's also active duty. She's also in special operations. She's spent most of her career operational. So she's got a much better understanding of what life is like for me, because she lives it as well. We do different things, but she gets it. And that's a great thing that we take advantage of. It's also increases the challenge, because sometimes she's coming, I'm going, we're like all over the place. And as parents, that's obviously really hard. We have an amazing family support system that's nearby. Otherwise, it'd be impossible for us to do what we do. But I can tell you, it was, prior to them, most significantly my kids, being a Green Beret and professional warfighter was really not just what I did, but it was who I was. Like, my entire identity was wrapped up in that. And I'm not sure that I would have gotten back to doing it on the team for as long as I did as a one-legged guy had I not had that frame of mind. Because in the hospital, I only saw 2 options. It was you either roll over and die, or you go back to doing what you were put on this planet to do. That was it. So it made it quite simple for me to just go all in on this one thing, because there was nothing else for me to do here on Earth, right? Like, that was my perception at the time. And that has since changed, particularly when I became a father. I was like, oh, damn, like, doing this in the uniform will forever be a huge part of who I am, but it's not all I am. And my kids have been the catalyst that really began that transition and kind of different perspective that I have now on myself, which has led to all these other things that I do, nowadays, and the way I live my life personally and professionally, without that my first son being that trigger for me to start to see things differently. Who knows where I'd be, what I'd be doing. But yeah, man, without those 3 involved in my life with how I do what I do, and more significantly, why I do what I do, I'm not the guy I am right now talking to you, dude. Not even
Yeah.
close.
No, I so understand that and appreciate that. I mean, I could go on and on about just, I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I've been a dad for 6 years, and it's just been an amazing journey. It's just like every day is just, I get it. It's, like I said, I don't want to
Yeah.
get, because once they're pulling back the layers, it's like, hey, what's this about? I just had to acknowledge that because that I really, when I read that, I'm like, man, wow, there's a level of appreciation there that is, you just can't put words around. So I know we're running close on time. I just want to highlight a couple more things as far as that, because I have a lot of questions, but you don't have to answer it now, but on the tail, like there's an acknowledged action music playlist. So I always wrap it up with, what song do you want to dedicate? And in anticipation of this podcast, and there's a song, I haven't done this for anybody yet, but there's a song I want to dedicate on your behalf, but I'm going to wait to hear your song first. So, but before we do that, you Green Beret, 17 years of service, right? Am I close?
Coming up on 18. Yeah.
18. So 17, 18 years. Okay. So definitely the trials and tribulations of wearing the uniform for close to 18 years in the environments you've been. I could only imagine. But then most recently, you wrote a book, Objective Secure, and I'm going to take pause and some of these questions because I wanted to ask you, how did it help you process your experiences? How did it challenge you? But what I wanted to say, like what I want to highlight is that Objective Secure, to write that book, and it was like a bestseller, right? It was like on Amazon, so it touched a lot of people. It just, how you wrote it, I really appreciate it, because you talked about, like, it's very motivating to people are really drawn to the special forces community. They just are. But then you talked about, right when it was like very objective and structured, it's like you incorporated your personal story, and it was just a great balance. So if you're thinking about reading it, go out and get it, because it's very well done. But in addition to that, your most recent event, you were at the Brothers Keeper Veteran Foundation just this past weekend as a keynote speaker, and then prior to that, earlier in the month, you did the Stars and Stripes Classic inaugural lacrosse matchup. You were the what? Oh man, I'm drawing a blank here. The
honorary captain.
Honorary captain, and
really cool.
Jocko Willing was the honorary captain of the Navy SEALs. Was this the first game? Like, it was the Green Berets played against in this lacrosse game by Foxborough, right?
It was at Foxborough Stadium, up in Mass, where the Patriots play. Yeah, it was the first time that they've done it, and it already based off of the demand and how successful it was. It looks like this will become a kind of an annual event, which is pretty cool.
That's cool, because I was like, well, it's not the academy because they're Green Berets and they're Navy SEALs, so they're operational. So I was like, so is it like an additional duty assignment? Hey, you guys made the cut. Like, you have X amount of time to go play lacrosse, or?
Dude, it was wild. It was like they just, the Green Beret Foundation and the Navy SEAL Foundation were kind of the respective supporting entities and recipients of the funds that were raised. And obviously both those organizations have direct touch points to the units. And they both just basically said, like, hey, we're going to put this thing together. Who wants to be on the team? Kind of expecting, because lacrosse it's still a bit of a niche sport. It's not like as popular as like football and baseball and stuff in America, but they got like hundreds of people from each of the regiments, the SEALs and the Green Berets, that wanted to be on the team. So they had to like actually go through and be like, oh man, we have a lot of options here. And then that was it. So dudes signed up. A lot of them are active guys. So a lot of that was depending on their work schedule, training, operations, deployments, blah, 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 all these things. So the guys that were able to make it, to get up there, and then they got together up in Mass for like 3 or 4 days prior to the game to like practice together. And that was it. But I'm telling you, watching these guys play, you would have thought that they had been playing together for years. And I think that's really just, indicative of the physical capability that we have to maintain year round, a level of communication that we have to be able to do with a lot of different people at a lot of different times, like leadership and work ethic and like those fundamental characteristics where you can take a bunch of dudes, most of which don't know each other, throw them in that arena, and 36 hours later, they're ready to play like professionals. It was really cool to experience.
And to have that venue, the Gillette Stadium, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. The Premier Lacrosse League, which is the nation's professional league, is the ones that really came in and hosted it. They're the ones that really kind of made it happen. So those guys are awesome.
Oh, that's cool. I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I was tracking it as best I could. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I know you have an upcoming speaking event with Consequence of Habit on October 5th with Ben Monet. He's a former Green Beret, and then Joey Bowen too. So you got, as it's detailed on your website, you do keynote presentations, inspirational talks, workshops, and consulting, right? And I'm just amazed at how you keep up with it and do it at the quality level and the output that you're doing. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that. It's one of the questions I get pretty often is, how do you balance all these things? And it's a fair question. And I'll give the true answer to it. And it's one you hear a lot from people in leadership positions or people that have reached some sense of success or whatever that means to you, is I've got really great people around me that I rely on to make choices. And that almost sounds like such a whatever answer. Like, yeah, okay, dude, like you kind of have to say that. But there's a reason why you hear so many people reference the people that they get to work with and that they empower to make choices because it's true. It's an absolute reality. And it's even more essential as most high performing, successful individuals live. It's a complex life. You got a lot of different things that are all going on at the same time. And there's a limitation to what you can do cognitively, physically, emotionally. It's only 24 hours in a day. If you try to do it all on your own, you're going to lose, especially when you're managing several different aspects of any one part of your life at the same time. So I'm just so blessed to have great people around me within my business that are willing to work with me on this project. And I'm also blessed because I've got leadership within the United States military, special forces community, all the way up through United States Army Special Operations Command that are incredibly supportive of me doing that side of my professional life while also being on an active duty. So yeah, man, I'm quite blessed.
That's pretty cool to hear. And I don't know if the internet was preparing me for our conversation today, but I seriously just found this quote from Warren Buffett. And it speaks to what you just said. Surround yourself with people that push you to do better. No drama or negativity, just higher goals and higher motivation. Good times and positive energy. No jealousy or hate, simply bringing out the absolute best in each other. I seriously, the timestamp was maybe 2 hours before we hit record. And I'm just like, and it's true, quality, input, output. And sometimes I think we got to work at it. Some of us have a easier draw than others as far as building that network, but some days we got to make a conscious effort to surround ourselves with those people who are going to challenge us when we need to be challenged, support us when we need supporting, and all that stuff that comes with making us better.
What you just said is literally why we built the Forge community, which is our virtual coaching and community platform, is exactly what you just said. It's having a team around you to rely on, people that are better than you, people that are going to hold you accountable, people that you can learn from, people that are there to pick you up when you get it wrong, which is going to happen, is essential for victory. And you may win a couple battles if you take on this self-made mentality with the hoodie on and fuck everybody. It's I'm just going to do it all on my own. You may win a couple battles that way, but you're going to lose the war, and you're going to lose to the person of the organization that has that exact same team mentality. So we built this for that exact reason, where we now have hundreds of people that are in there every day. Myself and another coming up on 20 other coaches, all with different specificities, and daily are in there in the grind, learning, implementing, getting better, and stacking those small victories one after another.
That's pretty cool. It almost sounds like being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's a huge part of it, for sure.
Putting ourselves in an arena to do that. Last question for you before we go to the music one. What advice do you have for those who are struggling or stuck with their ability to take action, or if their action is impaired? Because I know sometimes we feel like, man, we're up against the wall, just all odds are against us. But what can you say to that person who just feels stuck and they just feel impaired as far as being able to take action and to get themselves out of the rut?
Yeah, I mean the first step, as far as I'm concerned, is knowing what you are working towards. Like, what is the goal or what's the mission? And in my book, I outline a few ways to help someone identify that, which I won't go into now for the sake of time. But know what it is, or at least make a claim like this is
Mm,
what I'm going to do, or maybe the better question is this is who I'm going to become. That's it. Knowing that that may change at some point because you either accomplish it or on that journey you decide to shift and pivot authentically, but know what it is. I mean, because the cliche expression, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But
yeah.
without the clarity of the point, without the clarity of the mission, it makes it essentially impossible to correlate that
Mm,
with the really hard thing that you don't want to do. But it's when you can start to connect that dot between my alarm clock just went off. I don't want to get out of bed. Yeah, I know. Basically, nobody wants to get out of bed at 4 a.m. when it goes off after 6.5 hours of sleep. The alarm clock goes off. It's like, I'm turning this thing off right now for sure. But if I know what it is I need to go do in that moment and then immediately following it, and I can relate that one task with the mission that I'm trying to accomplish, even though that may take me 5, 10 years to make real, it's going to make it a lot easier. It's still going to be hard, but it's going to be easier to get up and do the thing that you know you need to do. So this like I'm stuck
mm.
thing, it's like, well, what are you trying to move towards? You're only
Oh,
stuck if you're trying to move somewhere. Otherwise, you're
yeah.
not stuck. You're just you. You're just static. But you're not stuck. Stuck implies I'm trying to move in a direction, but I quote unquote can't. Well, what direction are you trying to move in? That's like the first question I would ask somebody. What are you trying to do? Oh, I want to like have a six pack and traps that come out of my ears, and I want my arms to be huge to fill up my t-shirt. Awesome. Like the beautiful thing is it doesn't matter what it is. There's no wrong answer, but decide what it is step
Mm,
one. And then slowly over time, start to make those little incremental adjustments. I think what a lot of people think is that they have to make this quantum leap, like massive shift in their life where I was waking up at 9 a.m. every day. I'm going to start waking up at 3:30 tomorrow forever. And it's like, whoa, stop. Or I'm eating whatever I want and I look like shit and I feel like shit. I'm going to go from that to this like hyper focused, detailed oriented, macronutrient broke down 12 meals a day to this specificity, like going from that to this, it's like, that's not going to work. Right. Forget about going viral in your own life with trying to make a change towards something. It's small, little incremental adjustments done over time. That's the system that leads to success.
that's great. That's a great way to summarize what we talked about. Is to identify it, acknowledge it, whatever power word you want to put in, and then proceed. That's awesome. I mean, we could go on and on about this, but our hour's up. What song do you want to dedicate? What Nick Lavery song is going to be on the Acknowledge to Action playlist?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
You know what? We'll go with this was my jam when I was before I entered the military, when I started to train prior to basic training and became kind of my theme song as I was going through basic and airborne and like getting ready to go to selection. It is Shoot to Thrill by AC/DC.
Oh, God.
Classic.
I'm not just saying, it's my 6-year-old's favorite band. We listen to AC/DC almost on a daily.
It's good.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm going to read the lyrics of just one quick song, and I'm going to dedicate this song to you. So Nick Lavery gets 2 songs on the Acknowledge Action playlist.
Hell yeah.
So, rising up, back on the street, did
Oh,
my
here we go. I
time,
know exactly what this is.
took
Go
my
ahead.
chances, went the distance. Now I'm back on my feet, just a man and his will to survive. Boom, right?
Rocky. I mean, I got all that whole soundtrack is queued up on my gym playlist literally right now. So great choice, bro. I appreciate you.
That's good. In 1982, Survivor wrote that. They didn't even know they were writing it for you. Forget Rocky. Like, this is the Nick.
Right. It was for me. Yeah, for sure.
No, it was Nick. Thank you. This is a privilege and an honor. I'll see you October 5th. I'm going to go to the speak.
Perfect.
I'm in the Philadelphia market, so I'm like an hour away. I'm in the Delaware Air Guard, so it's in my backyard. So, Nick, I can't thank you enough, man. This is a privilege and an honor, and yeah, this is a great access point for so many now.
It's my privilege, brother, and my pleasure. I look forward to seeing you at that thing. We're gonna have a good time.
Okay. All right, Nick. I'll see you.
Take care, bro.
Okay. Thank you for tuning into this incredible conversation with Nick Lavery. His story of resilience, leadership, and the powerful of personal growth is truly inspiring. Nick's journey reminds us that no challenge is too great if we take ownership of our path, embrace humility, and lean on our community. Be sure to check out Nick Lavery's website, teammikecharliehotelnovember.com, and his book, Objective Secure. Links to his book and his website will be provided on the Acknowledged Action website as well. If these resources do not motivate and inspire you, I'm not sure what will. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more inspiring stories and insights. Wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone, and know the journey doesn't end here. Keep pushing forward, stay connected to your community, and always strive to build strong, authentic relationships. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and keep moving forward with the power of Acknowledged Action. This is the Acknowledged Action Podcast.